Welcome, Kalimera. This is Ron Allen in the 10th in a series on the emergency literature of the time of Mark, actually of the Gospel of Mark, because this literature seems to me to speak especially well to the emergency times in which we are living. And although a little hope is now breaking out in several different sectors, there still are things that are limiting our life. And that's why I turn to two miracle stories tonight, one embedded in the other, in Mark chapter 5, verses 21 to the end of the chapter. It's very long, so my reading and comments are going to have to be cursory. The two stories are the raising of Jairus' daughter, within which is set the story of the woman with the hemorrhage of blood. As the story begins, Jesus had crossed back to the other side, and a great crowd had gathered around him. You can feel the people pulsing together. And one of the leaders of the synagogue, named Jairus, came and saw Jesus, fell down at his feet, and begged him repeatedly. You can feel that, can't you? Begging. How long has it been since you wanted something so much you begged for it? He said, Jairus, my little daughter is at the point of death. The word little adds an extra sense of poignance to this story. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live. As you hear this, there are people sitting outside of intensive care units wondering whether or not their loved ones are going to live. I'm sure everyone who is listening to this series has been in something of the same situation. You know that sense of resignation mixed with desperation in the hope that something can happen. Jairus has heard that Jesus is representing the realm of God and working miracles to embody the presence of that realm and to point toward its future. And he wants Jesus to come. So a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. And there was a woman there who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. That is both a number and a symbol, meaning a very long time. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had. Again, a story that takes place around us, even as this video is rolling. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. Probably not the bottom of his garment, but the bottom of his prayer shawl. We don't know for sure, but the point is she sneaked in and reached out so that she could touch something he was wearing. She had said, if I can touch his clothes, I will be made well. Interesting play on words here. The expression be made well, many other times in the Gospel of Mark and the 27 books is translated would be saved. The word well is the same as the word saved. So she's not just talking about her physical health. She's talking about something more comprehensive. Immediately, her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of the disease. We don't know exactly what the hemorrhage was. It was probably an unremitting vaginal flow for which we would prescribe a trip to the physician and something like vitamin K. But in her context, it had the effect not only of being a physical inconvenience, that's not a strong enough word, but not only a physical thing, but it had both social and religious consequences. Socially, she was to stay at home and to limit her contact, her physical contact with others. And religiously, she had to wait for that hemorrhage to stop and to go through purification rites in order to be fully functioning as a member of the community. So her situation is that she's a woman already disadvantaged in that culture. She's physically sick, a disadvantage to herself. And you know, sometimes sickness not only is a physical matter, it has to do with your self-image. And she is uprooted, torn out of her everyday social and her religious communities. Touching Jesus, healing, meant restoration of her self, her physical self, her self-image, her relationships with others, and her accessibility to the religious community. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you? How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" And his disciples said to him, "But the woman," he looked all around to see who had done it, "but the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling." Religious awe, also fear at having violated a significant more, which is she has come out of her house and she has touched other people. He looked all around to see who had done it. The woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, told the whole truth. He said to her, "Your faith has healed you. Go, be healed of your disease." Faith in this context is trusting in the way of Jesus. The way of Jesus is the realm of God, which is the way that means doing the most for everyone in the community, finding a place, restoring, empowering, establishing, strengthening relationships, as well as being physically restored. This woman is a kind of model for us in that we are at different times in our lives, in different ways, often like her, some physically suffering, nearly everyone at one time or another mentally damaged in the way in which you understand yourself and the way in which you can operate, ruptured relationships, sometimes even antagonism and distance from the religious institutions of our day, the church. The promise here is that no matter how damaged we may be, in Jesus Christ, now and forever, there is restoration. And that may not mean that everything gets wrapped up between now and May 1st, or May 15th, or May 30th, or June 15th, but it does mean we can live within these uncertain circumstances with the confidence that there is a power already here. And our task is to break out of our self-perceived limitations and to reach out and touch. Because of the time, on Wednesday, I shall take up the story of the raising of Jairus' daughter.